So guys, last month I did a video and I talked about the time that I spanked my younger brother. And I know there was one of my relatives that said it was very disrespectful and also very immature. But I do have mixed feelings about that. And I do just want to talk about some other things that have really happened to me. But I really think that the purpose of that video was to do a couple of things. It was really just to talk about how my little brother, when he grew up, especially when he was a lot younger, he did get a lot of just entitlement or just a lot of just gentle parenting or just, he was definitely very spoiled. And I did feel there's definitely, that double standard we have with parenting that sometimes if, you're strict and harsh on one child and that's how you treat them, you may treat another child differently, but then you go back to, but then you don't really change, it's you treat one child one way and you treat another child another way, which is not always a good dynamic, but that does happen. What works for Chris Rock works for Chris Rock. What works for Tanya works for Tanya, and and that's definitely something that happens a lot in families. I think I remember my father saying how, my grandmother was very harsh on him, but his sisters were very spoiled, and yet a cousin that was very spoiled as well. Really, that's just kind of what happens really. But we always have the right to kind of talk about it as well, really. But I also will say that, like I've mentioned, I think very importantly that my brother is a good kid. He's doing very well. He had issues with anger and frustrations when he was younger. And I really don't see that in him, And I think that, he's going to have a really good life and I wish him well, really. But I just remember, not liking, just not really just liking, him being that annoying younger brother when he was a kid. But as I said, who does like an annoying younger brother? I have an older brother and we lived together. And I remember, doing stupid shit. I would prank call him in the middle of the night. Or I would remember one time, I was a little OCD about germs, so I would wash dishes multiple times, run his dishwasher. Now I'm at 37 years old, and for over 15 years, he's you never touch my dishwasher. I put a coater on it. Or I remember he used to have video on demand. I would order anime or adult videos, So, there are things that I've done to my older brother, 2.5 years older, where I've not really respected him. So, that's part of how younger brothers are. They're a bit of a pain in the ass, really, But what's a little different is that my younger brother's 12 years younger than me. So, it was when he was 4 or 5. And, I was, 15, 16, 17 at the time, really. And with me and my older brother, I lived with him when I was in my 20s. He's 2 years older than me. So he was 22, 23, really, So there is that thing about, just a little how sad it was that, I think I was definitely a lot more pathetic, really. And I know I've shared a lot about things I've overcome or how fucked up my life is or how disturbing my life is. But it's, as I said, that, we all handle life differently, and we grow up with different values or different ways that we were taught, really. And like I've said, in the 90s, there was a lot of bullying in our culture. A lot of Generation X or baby boomers were smacked and beaten by their parents, or when child abuse or things happened to them, no one made a big deal about it, or they said that's part of raising a child is to smack a child, because that's how it was, for a long time, really. But it was really in the 90s and 2000s and right now where people believe in gentle parenting, because there's more education on how abuse or hurting somebody, hurting a child, or what I call full metal jacket discipline impacts a child. There definitely has to be a mix, and there definitely have to be circumstances for every situation. I do think that there are times when kids receive a lot of gentle parenting or there's a lot of accommodations, or there's a lot of putting their needs first, and it creates a situation where they become spoiled or entitled, or they teach their older siblings that, you know what, you have to make sacrifices for the youngest, or the youngest needs always matter, or your needs don't matter. You have to think about the youngest, really. Or sometimes, as I said, that, you know what, maybe the oldest child gets disciplined more severely, but the youngest child doesn't get as disciplined, you know, so that does always create a dynamic. So, you know, it's one of those things too, that if I had a child, or multiple children, I'll be like, okay, well, the oldest and the youngest are treated the same way. There's no type of, oh, well, you're a girl, I'm going to be light on you, or you're a boy, I'm going to be lighter or harder on you, or you're the oldest, or you're the youngest, or you have a mental health issue, or whatever, really. You know, no, everybody gets treated equally. That's kind of what I believe in, because that really, you know, hurt me a bit, you know. So I know, like, you know, there's some things that, you know, kind of pissed me off when I was younger. Like, I remember, like, one time when I was a kid, you know, when I was in college, I remember how, you know, my older brother and my younger brother were jealous. So I remember my brother smacking me in the head when I came back because he was kind of jealous, and then my younger brother was like kicking me in the shins because they were kind of jealous that I was successful in college, because they kind of felt like, you know, because my dad was talking highly about me, that they were kind of like, you know, well, fuck you, Byron, you know, I just want to put you in your place. I remember another time, you know, one thing I really kind of hated was that sometimes my little brother would say things like, you know, can Byron play with me, or can Byron babysit me, or can Byron do this, can Byron do that. My dad would just walk by and say, oh, sure, Byron will do it. Like, ultimately force volunteering me. And sometimes he'll look at me like, okay, Byron, you're going to do it. You're going to do it, really. So it's almost like forcing me to hang out with my younger brother, or it's almost like a community service punishment by a court, really. It's always like, you know, it's always about him, or it's always about what he wants, really, you know, because it's always like that old saying, I always loved my grandmother. I wish, you know, I could have spend like more like holidays or vacations or other things with her, but she didn't want me around, really. It's like if I invited myself, or if I kind of talked to my dad about it, you know, it wouldn't work that way, really. So it does kind of suck when that happens. And that's one of the reasons why, you know, in college I didn't spend a lot of time at home, or I stopped like going home for holidays, because I really felt like that, first of all, my family really hurt my self-esteem. First of all, I felt my dad was a control freak, and I would just kind of go back to being a subservient child. Like, I always told myself that, yeah, I'm sorry, guys, I'm at work. You know, my boss is lazy. He's dumping his work on me. So that's how it goes at a hospital. So, you know, what I also want to say with that is, you know, really, really quick is, you know, that, you know, that's just not cool when things are like that. And I also, you know, remember, you know, another reason why I didn't go home was because I felt my brother was very entitled, or, you know what, I remember like during like some like one winter break in high school, my father would make me babysit him for 8 or 9 hours, and then my other father came home, found out about that, and then that stopped, really. And my other dad was like, oh, Byron doesn't mind, but it was like clearly him taking advantage of me, or taking advantage of my mental health issues, and being like, okay, I'm dumping this kid on you because, you know, I don't want to bring him to work, because, you know, my younger brother was always like wanting to eat his way, really, you know. So that was also something that happened to me, where it's almost like, you know, you're forced to babysit a kid. Or I remember when I was like 16 when that happened, really, you know, a 16-year-old watching a kid for over 8 or 9 hours. I know that happens in a lot of families, but that's just not right. I remember like another time my brother got fed up with me not being home for the holidays. So I remember like one time he slammed a car door on me, and then he slammed the door shut, and he was crossing his arms, and he had his head down because he was mad, really. My dad didn't see that, but it's almost like, again, as I said, I love my grandmother. If I did that to her, my dad would just yank me out of the car and just, you know, spank me or yell at me and make me show respect, really. So it always kind of felt that way too, where there always seemed to be, you know, with my younger brother, that he only cared about his needs, and he only cared, and if people upset him, he had no problem getting physical. And it doesn't mean that he was a violent person. He just had an anger issue and a snapping on people issue when he was younger. Unfortunately, he got out of that. But you can't really teach relatives or older relatives or older brothers and sisters, oh, well, you know what, the youngest is, entitled, the youngest can be a brat, and you have to kind of just, be Ned Flanders really, and take care of that. Because then it just says, hey, I can be fucked over and I can just be disrespected really, and that's not good. Another thing that made me really angry when I was in college was, I remember my third or fourth year of college, my dad intimidated me to go home for the holidays because my little brother missed me. He was like, okay, it's the holidays, think of him, okay. And because my younger brother was bitching and moaning for me to come home really. And I felt really angry because it's, as I said, I was 22 at that time. So, a 10-year-old is making my choices, so that's not good. So, when I think about, some of those things, it reminds me of something that my aunt said to me. She said to me that the way my parents are raising me, I'm probably going to be one of those people that are going to have a bunch of daughters bossing me around, or I'm going to have a wife bossing me around because, I was kind of taught to be a beta. I was taught that my needs don't matter. I was kind of taught that I have to make accommodations for other people. So the other part of it is that can teach somebody to be, violent or sociopathic. I think when I spanked my other brother, when he was hitting me and other things like that, it really, I think it was 14 at the time, he was 6 or something like that. But the point of it is, it was a situation where I just snapped because I was sick and tired of disrespect. I was sick and tired of being hit. I was sick and tired of him doing things like, if I'm playing a video game or watching TV, he would just jump in front of my face. Or sometimes he would turn off the television and be like, you need to listen to me. Or sometimes, I remember one time he said, you know what, Byron, my friends are coming over, and if you're mean to them, I'll kill you, and other things like that, So it's kind of as I said, it's easy for a person like me to get angry and spank my younger brother because I was raised that if I ever showed that amount of disrespect, to an adult, I would be spanked, I would be slapped, or I would be forced to apologize. I remember one time I got angry with my brother, getting on my nerves. I was in I think I was in 8th grade, and I told my dad in front of my grandmother, you know what, Jordan is really pissing me off. And my dad slapped me for saying the word pissing me off in front of Grandma Madeline, who was in her 80s, So it's kind of what I say really about spanking children, that sometimes it is needed. And sometimes when older relatives snap and they spank younger relatives, you have to look at the backstory. And the backstory was that my younger brother, when he was, a young kid, that he got way too many chances. He got a lot of gentle parenting. He got a lot of accommodations. He was a spoiled brat. But I did feel that wholeheartedly it was a couple of things. I think that sometimes when you raise a child from birth, you fall in love with that child more than adopting a child who's a little bit older. You don't really have that type of bond from, the birth of a child, really, So there is a sense of, that's probably why maybe my parents are more connected to him. I also feel, and I know this is kind of hurtful, my parents are politically incorrect, really, and they always see me as a black man when I'm mixed race, really. So this is kind of like their model child, my younger brother, because of his race and other things like that. So there may have been more favoritism, and I also feel that, as I said, that me and my older brother were very independent. We always kind of were lone wolves, really. So he was also kind of that child that had a better relationship with my parents, really. And I do think that, you develop more of a strong bond with some kids more than other kids. So that's probably why he kind of got that. But also, as I said, my parents probably saw that they were really strict with us, me and my older brother. And they probably just didn't want a situation where my younger brother probably developed antisocial things from, like, how we were turned down, or how we were, like, developed because of just the things that my parents did to us. Just like a lot of expectations. Like I said, one video, like I remember that we would get assignments like remember the name of all 30 kids in your classroom, or no TV, no Nintendo. I remember one time my dad threatened to spank me for not making my bed to his standard when I was, like, in second grade. I remember, like, what it was, I wrote the word sex on my homework assignment to be funny in, like, second grade, and my dad just spanked me bare ass. I remember and I also kind of remember too that, one time my brother was working really hard on a science fair project, and he copied one or two paragraphs from a book. My dad took all his paperwork, ripped it up, and made him rewrite it. So it's like, he spent like maybe 8 or 9 hours on it. You rip it up and you force the kid to rewrite it, really. And then you develop kids who don't want to, like me, who doesn't like working with people because I'm so used to a tyrant or a bully, taking things over, because I was raised with bully parenting or an alpha, not really teaching the next generation. Like, I'll take control. I hold all the power type of thing. And that's not a good dynamic. Because, like I said, you can raise a child that repeats that same cycle of bullying or being mean or being cruel. Or you can raise a beta where you raise somebody who is either a passive aggressive bitch like me, or you raise a kid to never really go as far as they can because they're like, I hate working people. My trust and mistrust issues are so out of whack, really. So I can understand, sometimes parents learn from the mistakes they make with older children and be lenient to the younger ones. But I do think that as parents go along the time, they have to, like, really evaluate and be like, I need to change how I parent the older ones. But it's, as I said, that I really think with my younger brother, he needed a little bit more strictness. I think that maybe what I should have gotten was a little bit more like democratic type of parenting. Just, okay, here are hard consequences for everything that you do, but we're going to talk a little bit about it, and you're going to make sure that you understand what you did, really. And I've had an issue with gaslighting. So I really think that my parents could have heard what I've had to say and then be like, okay, you're wrong in this area, you're wrong in that area, and you need to kind of understand that. So almost like, that would have kind of helped me a lot. And as I said before, that what happened was when I was in high school, there was a lot of mental illness cards. So whenever I was angry about things in life, really, and I was just using heavy, offensive language in school, people would be like, oh, that's just Byron being autistic, when that's not the case, really. Or when I was going through a bunch of antisocial behavior my third year of school, was because I was dealing with depression. I was recalling a bunch of trauma, and I watched a movie that was it caused a lot of, like, powerful emotions in me that I just went on a maybe like a lot of schizophrenic thoughts in my head. So really, so I really felt like that. Quite honestly, I shouldn't have gotten any mental illness cards. I should have just said, okay, well, Byron, you've gone down this path, and we need to talk about your feelings. We need to understand where you're coming from, and you need to understand what I learned in my late 30s, which it doesn't matter what we go through. We got to be good people, really. But I do feel like, family dynamics are important. And what I'll leave you with that video is that, my brother at that moment when he was, being disrespectful to me, hitting me, trying to run out of the house, and he had a pattern of, just trying to get his way at like 6 or 7 years old, and I spanked him. He really got onto my last nerve, really. And I think that what got onto my older brother's last nerve, and a lot of people's last nerves with my younger brother, was that there was a little too much leniency. But I also understand that there's been many times in my life where I've offended people and I've hurt people, and many people think that I should have been punished or I should have been put in my place, really. Like, I remember, like, when I was in high school, we did a skit on domestic violence, and I played a character that was verbally abusive to his wife, and I got some ideas, and I was like, saying a lot of, like, slurs and whatever to really just amp it up, really. And I remember, like, some kids just standing up and being like, hey, you need to stop that, and they wanted to whoop my ass. And I learned, okay, if they did that, let's say they did that, I would have been like, what, a few days later, I would walk up to them and be like, hey, you know what, you did this to me, I got what I deserved. Because, I can't be a person that's like, do whatever the hell I want, offend people with my mouth and whatever. So there is that, but definitely when I did that video, I felt like I did everything correct, because obviously, we need to make sure that we treat all of our children with respect and we are actually in a nurturing environment. I really think that I do believe in treating every child fairly. And I also believe, and that if you have double standards in parenting, you're going to raise kids with a bunch of problems. And I really think that I really think that, maybe how my father raised me was very similar to how he was raised. Obviously, my parents, saw that I was intelligent. My parents saw that I could go further than maybe maybe than my older brother, and maybe with my younger brother, but they probably wasn't sure yet, really. But I think that there was a lot of expectations on me, particularly because I was very, very book smart. I'm not good at my social intelligence and emotional intelligence. So I really, really think that maybe my parents saw a lot of potential in me and had a lot of expectations on me. But I really, really think that, as I've learned and as I've experienced in my life, that a lot of the old school way of teaching people who have that type of potential is to be an asshole to them, to be cruel to them, to be mean to them, to be harder that way. But that's how my father was raised. He was raised with a lot of expectations. He was raised with a lot of strictness, and a lot of his siblings were raised with leniency. So I really think that my dad just repeated what he knew, really. And like I've said, that it turns people. It has an impact on people. As I said, I've grown up to not be what my father wants. He one time had a talk about, he hopes that we all grow up to really become men who have families and not somebody like me who lives with my brother, not somebody like me who just says, family is one of the worst things that can happen to somebody, because sometimes you're in a dysfunctional family, or even like, all these talks that I'm giving you guys about the fact that I came from not an emotionally mature, a very antisocial family, and, parents that use bullying and mental health discrimination and have some prejudice, because like I said, I'm mixed race, but I'm a black man to my parents, and so is my older brother when we're actually mixed race. So yeah, it is hard when we're treated differently from other siblings, but that's just how it goes in life. But it doesn't mean my parents are bad. They're human. They've done a lot of great things for me. But I would also say, too, that I've learned some things about how I would raise children if I chose to have children. And like I'll say in this is that I would always say that everybody's treated equally. It goes straight with everybody. It doesn't go, oh, well, you're the youngest, or maybe I feel like I bond with you more. No, I'll punish them all equally. I'll discipline them all equally. And if I believe in, whipping that ass on one of them, I'll whip that ass on all of them, really, So that's important. But yeah, it's parenting is hard, and it's not something I ever want to do, but I appreciate anybody who can be a parent. So I really just hope this video kind of is a little bit more articulation. When I spanked my brother, I really, really felt that he needed it. You don't hit somebody, you don't run out of a house You don't say words like fuck. You don't just like, get in people's faces or turn off a television or turn off a video game system because you want attention, really. And when you have parents that have the mentality of, okay, he's saying, he wants to hang out with me, or when I have a girlfriend over and he's like, woo, give me some of that, when I kiss my girlfriend, or when, I think one time, I was going to a summer camp, and the day before, my dad invited my girlfriend over to my house, to our house, because he wanted, like, not always me going to her house. He wanted her to kind of come over, but my brother was always in the way. And I remember like how one time my brother manipulated me so I can watch cartoons, and my dad just did nothing about it, really. So it really was a situation. When I tell you these things that happened in high school and middle school, it was very, very clear that my younger brother did not have any respect for me. And he really felt like he could do what he wanted, and that was not okay, really. He should have had structure, he should have had discipline, he should have had consequences, and he should have learned respect and boundaries. And even though he was stubborn, he that really needed to be taught, that just because you want to get your way, it's not going to happen, really. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of kids are very spoiled nowadays, and there's a lot of like problems with children nowadays, is because we always teach our kids. One big thing that's taught is parents give in too much, and that's not good. I've had situations like that happen to me, and I know, like, again, when I talk about the 40-hour film project and my bad experiences, but also when I've spoken out about my bad experiences, in a way, I feel like Mark has kind of given into, maybe all my reflections, when he could have said, well, fuck you, Byron, or whatever. I'm trying to say, like, I also have to look at that with myself, really. I think that I do share my self-reflections to people a lot about what I've learned, but I still need consequences for my actions and all that. Or people to be like, okay, I've lost my respect for you, and you're not getting it back, really. You say you change, or you're struggling to change, or whatever, really. But I'm okay with the video that I posted. I think that's necessary, but I think this is a good follow-up. And like I've said about my younger brother, I wish him well. He's a good kid. If he starts a family, he's more of a man than me, because anybody who takes on raising children and having a family, they're not thinking about themselves. When there's people like me that, I've learned that I just want my life to be about me, because I've put too many people ahead of me my entire life, or I just know what it's like to be in the back seat or feel like a dog, really, where it's like, oh, it's about everybody else except for me, or I'm not allowed to ask for things. Or I remember like one time I was like talking to my dad as a kid. I remember when I was a kid, I was saying, like, Dad, I want to do this for my birthday. My dad's like, wow, you're a very selfish kid for bringing up your birthday and other things like that, So yeah, it is rough, and that's why, I've learned not to be, reaching out to people, ask for help, teamwork, or when I celebrate my birthday or something special for me, I keep it to myself and not to my family, because it reminds me all the times when I was told that that's kind of selfish, or when it really feels like, it doesn't matter when you do this, but it matters when somebody else does that type of thing, really. But like I said, we all make mistakes. I'm not perfect. If I raise kids, I'm going to make mistakes too, really, So this is what this whole video essay is about, really, I'm okay with the video that I posted. But I'm also understanding about how my brother turned out, a little bit about my parents' psychology, and also just, saying, to everybody, treat your kids fairly, treat all of them fairly. And also, too, that if you create a situation where one's treated differently, that can create a bunch of problems. And then the other thing, too, is that if you just treat one with a lot of, entitlement and passes, and treat another one with a lot of just, they can do whatever the hell they want, really, what's going to happen is you create a situation where you can have a kid that just says family's not for me, or you can create a kid that develops more antisocial disorders, or you can create a kid that's like, my role in life is to be, everybody's bitch, really, because I'm getting that from my family, and that's just not good. So I hope that this clarifies things, and that's all I gotta say, really. But I also want to say that, I do come from a good family. Talking about these things are very helpful. It helps me make closure with things that were painful to me.